Welcome to Module 4, Forgiveness. This segment is likened to the military's naval seal in my estimation, because it requires so much technique and so much practical applications that everyone's not going to be able to do it. So we have to come into the forgiveness segment knowing that this is not something that everyone's going to be able to participate. And quite frankly, people won't choose to participate in this segment called forgiveness. Forgiveness means that you are going to have to be heavy on the maturity and heavy on the maturity. And unfortunately, those are characteristics that are not developed in every human being. So when we're upset and when we're wondering why people won't forgive, we have to remember that forgiveness is the elite. It's for the elite. It's the Navy SEAL. Like when we think about war and strategy and the Army and the military forces, this segment is for those who are as skilled as the Navy SEAL. Because you have to have the grit, you have to have the perseverance, you have to have the desire to stay in the fight. Because everything in you at times will go against the actions of forgiveness. It's counterintuitive because we want to stay in a bad mood, we want to get revenge. But when we're moving in forgiveness, it requires that we pull from something greater than ourselves and within ourselves. And for those of you who are spiritual, that would be your God experience. And for those of you who are not spiritual, it would just be what you may have seen, experienced, and just a very difficult endeavor, but a very possible endeavor. This segment, we're going to start out with understanding, like I stated, that hands down, it's the most difficult aspect. So you're going to have a lot of patience in dealing with people and with teaching people about forgiveness. And you have to check your forgiveness and your model of forgiveness, because it's easy to get exasperated and to side and agree with people when you're teaching about forgiveness or when you are mediating forgiveness. It's just you have to stay aware of your transference, stay aware of what you're feeling, and if it triggers emotions from you, and quite frankly, it will. So it's an opportunity for you to develop as well. And we know that forgiveness is difficult and it's not always easy. And even, after we have decided, we have to continue to decide and continue to decide that forgiveness is going to be our action of choice. Forgiveness expresses the epitome of who God is, because it encompasses mercy, kindness, thoughtfulness, sacrificial love, and so much more. Forgiveness is an illustration of character. It announces your cognition on who you are and, your expectations and your abilities, because forgiveness is a declaration that I'm not perfect. And neither indeed do I expect other people to be perfect. But in the midst of pain, because that's in our amygdala, we lose sight of all of the rationale on why I should forgive and why human beings make mistakes, because we become trapped and locked into our amygdala and our emotions. So we remember the Brown family. They had a lot of unforgiveness. And I think the biggest model or the biggest example of the unforgiveness was the divorce between Susie's parents. Divorce is an assault against forgiveness. And sometimes you cannot be reconciled due to violence, due to marital affairs. But it sends a loud message to the family members that sometimes forgiveness is not possible, or how you forgive. Because even if there is a disruption in the marital union, there can be an amicable way to forgive, maybe not be reconciled, but to have the right spirit. So we're going to talk about forgiveness, because forgiveness in totality is the debt cancellation. You're not looking for revenge. You have decided to exchange your stress and your vengeance and to give it over to God if you are a religious person, or even if you are a person who just believes that what goes around comes around. You just give the scenario to the system, and you take the system out of you and you give it to the system, and you just give up your right to revenge. And so it is difficult because in our human nature we want to seek revenge, but forgiveness says I'm no longer going to try to collect from you or make you be punished for what you've done to me. And again, it is a declaration that you understand that you're not perfect and that there is no moral superiority in you, and that at some point you have hurt someone and that you will hurt someone. And so again, back to the Brown family, it's looking at how they learned forgiveness, how Susie and her family learned forgiveness because of the divorce of her parents. There's also disharmony and unforgiveness between some of her siblings against the parents. So it becomes a model and a pattern of how people forgive, because children, like in every circumstance, they learn how to forgive and they learn how to love from their parents. We learn from our home of origin. So in Susie's experience and her siblings' experience and probably her parents' experiences, they did not fully get an understanding of how to operate in forgiveness. And so many times that happens. And I'm using the Brown family as an example because this is our running vignette. But even in your family, it's important that you look at, how has forgiveness been modeled? How has it been modeled in your family? Have you been able to see that people are forgiving? Have you noticed that people hold grudges? It's a multi-generational experience with forgiveness, because if you don't see it, then you don't know what to expect, and it becomes the common practices of the family. So going back and looking at your genograms that we talked about and looking at multi-level generational patterns of forgiveness, and how did they disengage? Was there, a cutoff? Was there estrangement? Because generationally, if there's estrangement, people will walk in that pattern and they won't practice forgiveness, because forgiveness is not a part of the model of family and unification. So it's important that you even question, how did I learn about forgiveness? What do I know about forgiveness? We know there's the practical word of God that teaches forgiveness, but sometimes people say, well, I'm not God. But there's many references about forgiveness throughout the Bible dealing with humanity, and we're going to tackle that later on in our modules. But today we're looking at the unforgiveness and its impact, and how to help people who are willing, because you have to be willing to walk in forgiveness. And I think it's important that we talk about the consequences of not forgiving one another and not being a forgiving person, because that can be a motivation, and it also can be an instrumental tool when you're working with families, when you're working with your congregations, or when you're working with yourself, so that you can begin to have that dialogue and bring awareness to what unforgiveness is actually doing to you and others, because we're interconnected. Remember, we talked about the law of quantum physics. And so every particle is affected by the other particle. No man is an island. So when I'm in unforgiveness, I'm impacted, but everyone else around me is also impacted. It's not an individual affair. All right. So the interesting thing is that science has declared unforgiveness to be a disease in the medical books, and they're finding more and more studies and more information about the ramifications of unforgiveness. There was a Howard University study that said 61% of men and 59% of women of those who are difficult to treat with cancer were traced to have unforgiveness. So unforgiveness is really prominent among those who have cancer, because we were not made in the way God made us. We were made in love. So we weren't made to be angry, to be resentful, to relive experiences, and to put our bodies in re-injury and constant trauma through the process of unforgiveness. And I think that is something to remember, because you're going to see families who have unforgiveness, and you may have unforgiveness. And then I want you to look at what's their health like, because it impairs the health. If nothing else, this could be a motivation for you to admonish and to encourage family members to look at resolving the issues, because they feel like, if I just cut you off, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm healthy. The internet is saying cut off toxic stress, but you can't cut off the toxic stress and unforgiveness and still hold on to it, because unforgiveness makes you hold on to the event and to the negative emotions. So we're looking at it and how even in the Brown families, there is a lot of enmeshment sometimes with unforgiveness. There's group unforgiveness, like the family experiences pain together. So if one person is injured, then everyone is injured. So that's like the experience is shared and the emotion is shared. And although we love each other, we have to be careful that how we deal with that. And I get it, because you love your loved ones and you don't want to see them hurt, and you can have an opinion about what happened. But as far as it goes with the unforgiveness, you have to decide, like, am I going to be plagued by what other people did, and what cousins did to each other, what grandparents did, or what someone did to my sibling? And it's not to say that you're disloyal. It's just deciding that I can forgive and still love both parties. And it doesn't mean I'm in relationship with. It's just that I want to keep myself healthy, and I don't want to be someone who eventually becomes sick or impacts my other relationships because of this enmeshed unforgiveness. So you get to decide. You get to be an individual in how you handle the offense and how you handle the process of forgiveness. You can love both sides. And I know it gets tricky because people want you to model their style of unforgiveness, but you get to decide. I say that's one of the key components in dealing with families, is helping them to know respectfully, how do you walk and share love, but not share offense in that way, because you may have a weaker immune system and it may cause you to be sicker than the person who forgives but can go on and can still conduct themselves in a fashion that is functional. So you get to decide, and you have to look at that. You get to ask those questions. And then you get to determine who you want to model. You get to look at, okay, because maybe someone is more forgiving. Maybe someone is a loving person. And maybe you get to decide, like, I'm going to take that approach. I'm still going to be in the family because we talked about enmeshment and individuality and healthy connections. But you get to even say, I want to model how to protest, meaning say that the event was offensive, but I don't want to walk in unforgiveness. I don't want to walk in pain, and I don't want to walk in resentment. So I'm going to model for my family how to be offended, but how to turn it over to God, or how to let them go and let karma take care of it and still protect myself. It's not reconciliation, but it's deciding not to let the ugly and the cancerous emotional turmoil of unforgiveness rest in my body. So you get to decide if you want to be that, and you get to identify the people who just have negative styles of forgiving, and they just kind of want to put that on you, and they want to talk negative about people, and they want to try to seek revenge. And you get to decide how to be in a family and be loving, but not participate in that portion of the unforgiveness cycle. Now, there's three types of forgiveness. When we're looking at forgiveness, there's personal forgiveness, there's interpersonal forgiveness, and there's spiritual forgiveness. And all of these forgivenesses impact how you show up in the family and how you show up in relationship. Personal forgiveness, I'm going to say that one first, because that one goes kind of covert, and we kind of feel like we have a right to privately not forgive ourselves for mistakes and things that we may have done and in our past, and we may have a lot of shame, and we tell ourselves, I could never forgive myself for that. And by harboring that unforgiveness, it's still the same. You can still have the same medical issues and all of those things, and it influences how you engage with other people, because it makes you an unforgiving person. Because even if it's you in the jail cell of unforgiveness, that you have a cell called unforgiveness. And so there is a compartment in your life and relationship life where if you're there, you're more likely to put other people there, which is interpersonal forgiveness, where you're injured by, well, actually, I'm sorry. Personal forgiveness is when someone injures you. Let me back up. Personal is when someone forgives you and injures you, and intrapersonal is when you don't forgive yourself. So when you think about personal, I know I kind of got you guys confused, but this is worth slowing down and restating so that we're clear with the three types of forgiveness. Personal is someone injures you, someone steps on your toe, someone assaults you, someone betrays you. That is personal. And it's still the same. You have this person in the jail cell. And then there's interpersonal where, again, like I stated, you did something and you can't forgive yourself. You feel so bad about it. You got a lot of guilt and shame. So that prison door is open. So you start to accumulate people. You start to accumulate offenses. And guess what? You can even put God in that prison of unforgiveness because God may not have shown up for you. Maybe he didn't do something that you asked him to do. Maybe he didn't protect you. Maybe he didn't protect a family member and you thought for sure he should have shown up. Now, this is most difficult because a lot of people are not gutsy enough to say, I was molested as a child and I'm angry at God. And so I don't want to be a Christian. I don't want to trust God. I have a lot of unforgiveness towards God because he let my parents be on crack. He let my parents abandon me. He let my uncle rape me. He let my family members be killed in gunfire, or he let a car accident happen, or he let a sickness come upon our family. And so it's difficult to say that you are angry with God and that you are resentful and that you have unforgiveness, but it shows up. It shows up. And then you're able to put God in that same prison. And the minute someone else, if you can hold God hostage to unforgiveness, you can hold anyone a hostage to unforgiveness. So it's important that you check with your families, that you check with yourself, and that you check with your congregation. Are you angry with God? And it's going to take, really a safe place for people to admit that, because we want to say, no, I'm not angry with God. He does all things well. But it takes really delving into the unconscious and really into the emotions and letting people understand that it's safe to say I'm disappointed. It's safe to say that I protest. I thought God should have protected me. I thought God should have brought my absent parent home. I thought God should have healed my loved one. You get to say that, because all of that unforgiveness, if it's not cleaned out, it will continue to spread throughout every relationship. It begins with the individual, then it goes into relationships, and then it goes into the community. So you are just accumulating people in your cell of unforgiveness. And you can't live your life if you're managing the cell of unforgiveness and making sure the door's locked and passing by and making sure everyone's still where you left them, because you can't move away from the jail cell because you're guarding those that you have in the jail cell of unforgiveness. So your life is uneventful, and you're always on the lookout to arrest somebody else and put them in the jail of unforgiveness. So it's really important that we pay attention to that. So the elements of unforgiveness, these are some of the elements, that when there's unforgiveness, there's shame, there's guilt, there is a feeling of retribution, like you want to pay. You want to pay people back. You want to get vengeance. They're angry at the world, and they're right fighters, and they're usually the people who are willing to participate in riots or uproars or causes because they're just so angry, and it's obvious that they have a lot of anger in them. And so the paradigm of a person who is dealing with unforgiveness is shifted in negativity. It's just the way they think about things. Don't let them off the hook. If I were you, I wouldn't forgive that. No, you need to go speak up for yourself. Everything is a critical event, and they are always looking to settle the score. And they are the people who say, if I don't get them in the wash, I'll get them in the rinse. And they are very aggressive, and they don't let small offenses go. You'll see them arguing in restaurants, and with any perceived injustice, there seems to be an overreacting because there's so much unforgiveness. And then there's just this people who are living in unforgiveness. They're unrealistic. They just have like a fantasy mindset, and they feel like either two things are happening and that they're unrealistic, that people should be perfect, or people can't make mistakes. That's unrealistic. That's not seeing yourself in clarity, and it's not seeing other people, because sometimes we hold people to a higher degree or responsibility than we hold ourselves. So if you are in unforgiveness, you're unrealistic. You're just not even thinking rationally. You think that, this is just the perfect or they're demons. So they're devils or they're demons. And so that's unrealistic. So the boundaries are unrealistic with people who have unforgiveness. They're either too rigid, like they're like, no, nobody's going to do this, or you can't, use this, or you can't come to my house, or, they're just so protective. They're overly protective emotionally with their property, with their children. Don't say nothing to my children. And it's just, you can see like the boundaries are just really rigid and they're not realistic. Or, you can see that with the rigid boundaries that they won't budge. They won't budge. They're just like, no, I'm not forgiving them. No, I don't want to talk to them on the phone. No, they meant that. And no, I'm not going to let anybody use me. So it's a really observable rigidness that you are able to see. So let's talk about what the physical cost is for unforgiveness. And again, it's easy to look through families, cancers, high blood pressures, diabetes. Yes, eating has something to do with that, but more impacting is your emotional state and your spiritual state. So again, it's worth repeating. Look at illnesses, look at your illnesses, and look at family patterns of illnesses. Look at what the congregation is dealing with, and you can ask that question. And the way to ask that question is, are you in conflict? Did someone hurt you? Because usually to say unforgiveness, people will say, oh, I let everybody go. It's better to start with, have you been offended? Have you been hurt? Because that opens the door to how they tell and share their experience. And you're likely to get people to be a little more honest and transparent if you ask the question in that way versus saying, are you dealing with unforgiveness? Because most people say, no, I let it go. I let it go. And they're just so unaware that there's so much unforgiveness still in there. So you have to be strategic when dealing with people who are experiencing unforgiveness. So the body reacts to anger and pain, which is what happens when you are asked to forgive and you're walking in unforgiveness. There has been an offense, and now it is an offense where you lost something or you were hurt and you were offended or, along those lines, and your body reacts to the issue in a stressful manner. And remember, anger is not bad. It's a protest that I lost something. I don't like something. It's a protest, or I need something. So it's a protest. It's a sensor that's letting you know something in your values and something in your safety is out of balance. So anger in and of itself is not bad. It's an indication that something needs to happen. But when that anger stays for a long time, it can create a flashing light, red light, like an ambulance sound being triggered for years and days. And so it begins to be stressful unto your body, and it triggers your amygdala, the part of your brain where the limbic system is and where the emotions are. And then your sympathetic nervous system is alerted and with the fight or flight, and you're ready to go. Like you're in a state of I have to protect myself, or I have to fight a bear. And so if you're in this position, like I have to fight a bear, and at all times, your body can't sustain that. So think about that, days and nights and years of being in a position to fight a bear. It wears on your body. And during that stress stage, it releases 3 chemicals: cortisol, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. And so epinephrine raises your heart rate, which is not good for your heart, to have an accelerated heart rate. So your poor little heart is working overtime when you're in consistent stress of unforgiveness and offense. And then with the norepinephrine, the adrenaline, it constricts your blood vessels. So not only is your heart working fast, but now your blood vessels are constricted, and it's hard for the blood to get in there, to get throughout the body and to provide oxygen and to help you to be a healthy person. And then the cortisol, it causes inflammation throughout the body. And we know that inflammation has to do with pain and disease. So your body is off course. your body becomes off course. And that's something that we need to remember, and to let people know that you're not getting away with this unforgiveness, because it is impacting your body significantly. We know that joint pain, people are saying my knees, my back, and we get to investigate, like, okay, if you didn't do anything, if you didn't run cross country and leap walls and, swim all day, like, and you're basically a person who's inactive, what is causing this? And that can help you get to the root of it. And that's what medical doctors do. And they have been able to do with cancer patients, like I stated earlier, is getting to the social and emotional root of pain. And so the inflammation with the joint pain, the arthritis, the back, the neck, the lower back, it's good to notice patterns. If something stressful is going on, or you are injured, or you keep, thinking about the issue, and now your back hurts, and now your neck hurts. And so all of those issues could be connected to that. It's important to look at that. There's weight gain because of the cortisol. During stressful times, you're holding on to it. Isn't that something? You're holding on to the issues, and now you're holding on to the weight because you're holding on to issues. And then you can have headaches because of the pressure, the inflammation, and the lack of oxygen that's flowing through your body. High blood pressure. We already mentioned cancer, diabetes, and then there's a calcification on your liver. So even your liver can't digest poisons properly because there's a calcification on it because of what the hormones are producing in your body. So the liver's job is to process toxins. So you're full of toxins. Unforgiveness is toxic, and we call people toxic, but we hold on to people and events. And so now our bodies become a representative of what's going on in our relationships. It's toxic. You have skin issues, and then brain damages. It changes your brain. It just creates cell damage, brain damage, all of those things, because we were made to live in love. And when we look at it from a mental health perspective, it causes you to ruminate, right? If you think about it over and over and over again, you become overly obsessed with the event. And so if someone already has a mental health issue, it is going to be more difficult for them to manage forgiveness. And that's important that you let them know that their mental health and their prior traumas do impact their ability to forgive, because awareness is a big part of getting management over your mental health. Awareness, just being aware of, okay, yes, it is harder for me to stop thinking about this because I already have a pre-existing mental health issue. So rumination means you're overly obsessed with the issue, and you just play it back, kind of like a television station that you just keep turning to that station, keep turning to that station. Every time you think about it, you're watching the segment. You're watching the segment. Now, the danger of that is that you are focusing on the negativity. And the brain has already a proclivity to have a negative bias. So meaning that it looks for negative things. And the reason why it looks for negative things is because it's trying to keep you safe. And so if you keep thinking those negative thoughts, you're indeed telling your brain, I'm not safe, and this is the issue. So be on the lookout. It's like drawing a sketch of someone or a circumstance and telling your brain, be on the lookout for this. So you become hypersensitive to it, and your brain becomes more alerted to it, and you continue to think on it because your brain wants to keep you safe. The memory's sole purpose was to keep us safe. And so you keep rehearsing it. You keep drumming it into your system. You keep reliving it. And the thing is, with the hippocampus, where the memories are stored, there is no calendar or timeline. So it's a forever memory in the brain, and it feels recent. That's why people with trauma, they can relive it and they sweat, or they feel like it's still happening, because when you're in your feelings, there is no calendar, there is no time zone. So every offense feels fresh. You can't differentiate in your amygdala and in your feelings the time zone. Time zones have everything to do with your prefrontal cortex, which is your rationale, your school, your university. All of your knowledge happens in your prefrontal cortex. So in your amygdala, you're in the trauma, and your hippocampus and the limbic system, you're just reliving it and feeling it, but you're unable to differentiate between the here and now and the then. So you're re-injured, you can smell it, you can feel it. It's just hard to, to get away from it when that rumination is happening. And the memories, they live in cells, they live in neurons, and like I said, the constant remembering of it, it wraps a protective sheet around it, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so the memory gets protected, and it stretches and grows, and it becomes more difficult to forget, because in the hippocampus, when we talk about memories, the memory, we have like a two-shelf memory system where things that are important or dangerous, I should say, they're easily accessible on top, and things that are not as dangerous, they live on the bottom. Our safety and, positive experiences. So we have a tendency to focus more on the negative, because the negative is danger. It means that there's not safety. Someone may hurt me. Someone doesn't think I'm valuable. So in our primitive mind, it's like, okay, we have to be safe. And so we keep those memories fresh, and kind of like a refrigerator. Can we use a refrigerator? The refrigerator, if we looked at memories, all of the dangerous stuff, all of the things that we're afraid of, they stay in the top. And then our safety, how people love us, how safe we are, that's in the freezer. And we immediately have access to the refrigerator because that's our proclivity. We have a negative bias. So we move to things that make us, we're concerned about safety. We're concerned about trusting people because this person hurt me. So, I can't trust them. So those memories are easily accessible. So you can remember it like this. The conscious mind is the top drawer, and the unconscious mind is the bottom drawer. And so if we're going to have the benefit of stopping the rumination is that we break up the deeper paths in our the pathways, the neural pathways, because it's like a pattern. It's like a road. When you think about your neural pathways and the way you respond to things, you're building a pathway, kind of like in the dirt. And the more you think about it, the grooves get deeper. And so when you have a situation, it's like, come this way. This is the beaten path. This is the path that you always go. And that's how habits are formed. And so again, it's very important that we focus on not ruminating. And it just, when we keep ruminating, we're screaming pain, 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 pain. And we're just, the neural pathways are lighting up, and it's just causing havoc in our body. We're re-injuring ourselves. The incidents may have happened, but then we take part in the re-injuring of ourselves. And then there's resentment, and resentment, the re means again, and the resentment means the feeling, the memory. So you're reliving the memory over and over again, and they can literally see that your amygdala becomes inflamed. And the stronger the memory, the harder it is to calm yourself down. So you, in essence, are getting angrier and angrier and angrier the more you talk about it. And the more years you think that time heals all wounds, it doesn't. If you're ruminating, time actually increases the wound, and it makes it more difficult to calm yourself down and to get back into your parasympathetic nervous system where you can, relax. And so that becomes a challenge. And then so you remember the person, and that person becomes more of a negative stimuli. Like you see their face, and everything in you begins to trigger because you are so sensitive, because they've been ruminating about the situation. So it creates a lot of mental health disorders. You're wreaking havoc on your nervous system. You're wreaking havoc on your self-worth, and how could they do this to me? And it's because it's a safety issue. If you're constantly thinking about it, you're creating panic in your system that sends messages that you're not safe. You're not safe. And our prime desire is to be safe. We grow in safety. We love in safety. So we need safety. And so when safety is lost, that is the essence of trauma, that we don't feel safe. We don't feel connected. We don't feel covered. And so that creates a lot of anxiety. And so people who have unforgiveness, they deal with a lot of anxiety and depression, because then you begin to say, how did this happen to me? No one loves me. Look how people treat me, et cetera, et cetera. And it feeds into the depression loop. And so it changes, how the person feels about themselves, their worth in the world, their value in the world. How could this happen to me? And look how they treat me. It becomes a theme of I am a victim and I am a martyr. And when you're a victim, you're disempowered. So, and that's a helpless state, and it doesn't feel good because then it leads to hopelessness. And so a lot of emotional dysregulation, with your anger, you fly off the handle because you've got so much brewing in you and you're in so much protest all the time that you're probably intermittently explosive. People flying off the handle over small things, small disagreements in families, small disagreements at church, just small disagreement. That's an indication that someone is emotionally dysregulated. Their emotions are out of control. And then there's depressive emotions. Something happens, they're tearful. They may, like I've mentioned previously, if they see a family member's at a function and they feel like they've been left out, they're depressive and they're shut down and they isolate and they're wounded, easily wounded because they're emotionally dysregulated. And of course, with anxiety, they're paranoid, and they're fearful and they're avoidant and they're trying to avoid situations and people because they're so sensitive and they can't control their emotions. They're emotionally dysregulated. And it impacts, like we mentioned, it impacts your ability to be social and to have connectedness because you feel like people are perfect, people have to be perfect, or you have to please, or there is you expect people to do things that they're not going to do, to keep you happy, to manage your emotions. It's not going to happen. And so another aspect of it with people who are dealing with unforgiveness is they have poor communication skills. They just shut down because they're always flooded emotionally. They don't have the capacity to access the prefrontal cortex where communication, this is the university. Your prefrontal cortex, you have to remember, is the university. That's where logic, impulsivity, planning, everything, even your spirituality happens in your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain. And so if you can't access that because you're always alerted in your fight or flight, then you're going to be a poor communicator. And it is strategic that your prefrontal cortex is cut off when you're in the fight or flight because you're not supposed to be rational. You need all your energy to run, to jump, and instinctual, and not to be calm. You have to be calm in order to access your planning and your prefrontal cortex. So you won't be able to communicate. You won't be able to communicate. You'll just shut down, and your behavior will be the communication. And there's a lot of with that is your development is impaired. If you're always angry, and remember we talked about maturity, like to walk in forgiveness, you have to be mature. So there's a lot of immaturity and arrested development. You can't get over the event, so you're not developing as a person. You're not using your logic. You're not using, your higher order thinking to negotiate and to forgive and to, walk in your mind and not your feelings. Because if you're always walking in your feelings, then you're in an immature state. You're more like in the child state. So unforgiveness keeps you arrested in your development, and it keeps you in the state where you have immature reasoning. They did this to me, so I did this to them. Or, it's just very childlike in your reasoning. So when you're listening for people who are right fighting and vengeful, and you're going to be able to hear themes of immature reasoning. And then if you see them acting out, you're going to be able to see patterns of immature emotional responding, tantruming, and just, crying instead of speaking and telling people what's wrong and, sending subliminal message. Those are all arrested development. And it's a result of not developing and walking in maturity and forgiveness. Again, the negative entanglements of paranoia. You think everyone's out to get you. You think everyone's talking about you. And it's all because of the sensitivity of being in unforgiveness. And so you just, the isolation, And now you're in the right fighting and you want to impress people because you have moral superiority. You're better than everybody else. Everyone else is wrong. Everyone else is horrible, because, forgiveness judges, and we begin to think in our minds. We decrease the value, and we decrease people's ability and capacity and who they are. So now we feel like we're better than them, and we want to make sure we always look good and we're good because we're high and above them. So it's a lot of work that goes into that, and we can't be in intimacy. If you have unforgiveness streams, you think that you're intimate with people, but in the back of your mind, there is some reservation that I can't trust people. And so that puts a gap between you, and you can only trust so much before you feel like, I knew you were going to hurt me. So the unforgiveness creates a gap in intimacy. And we all need to feel connected, and we all need to be able to rest. And if we're not feeling connected, then we're not resting. We're just always waiting for the shoe to drop, which creates more anxiety. You're waiting for something bad to happen. You're waiting to be betrayed. You're waiting to be cheated on. You're waiting to whatever it is, because you have that negative bias and you're so focused on the negative side of people and the negative behaviors of people. And it's important to remember this part. I think we lose sight of this. But people who are walking in unforgiveness are dangerous. Dangerous. They're dangerous, and it causes them to, because of the anger, they can go into fits of rage, and they can want to react revenge on you. Even among family members kill family members. Cain killed Abel, and David's son, one son killed the other son. And we see so many instances in our day where people will kill each other's character, family or not. They will physically hurt each other. They will sometimes hurt each other to the point of death, where there's a murder-suicide incident, and it's because of the unforgiveness. So we should not blink when people are walking in unforgiveness, because they're dangerous. People who don't forgive are dangerous because they're holding that anger, and they're also holding the resentment that causes them to want to take revenge. They have a mindset of revenge, and the thought is a seed. And if they want to see someone suffer, and they're projecting that into the atmosphere, I want the person to suffer. When they get an opportunity, they will make the person suffer, or they will be happy when the person is suffering. And that creates just a cycle of just negativity. So that an unforgiving person is a dangerous person, and they're constantly focused on the loss and the irrational thinking of recovering, because they want to kind of even the score. But for example, if there's incest or if there's a molestation in the family, you can't even that score. No one's getting their purity back. So you have to accept that some things you can't get back. But if you're walking in unforgiveness, you're saying, I want it back. That's unrealistic. You're not going to get certain things back. And so you just stay enraged, and the anger continues to grow, and you become more dangerous. So it's just also important that you look at people, although innocent or not, that they're capable of doing harmful things because of unforgiveness. They're capable of being irrational because of unforgiveness. It changes everything about their spirituality, their connection to God, their connection to themselves, and their connection to other people. Unforgiveness is a high cost to pay. But like I stated, many people don't know how to manage it. They don't know first what it's doing to them. They can't count up the cost if they're not aware how it's destroying them personally, and how it's destroying them socially and spiritually. So it's our responsibility to bring attention to, look, there are consequences to unforgiveness. And guess what? You, the individual that's holding the unforgiveness, you're suffering the most. It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Being angry and resentful and unforgiving towards other people, it only hurts the person who is holding the unforgiveness. Happens all the time. You'll see the other people that they're happy, moving along with their life on social media, going forward, and you're stuck carrying the memory in your cells, in your body, and you're paying the cost. You, in fact, have done more damage to yourself than the person has. You have, if you are walking in unforgiveness, you've given yourself permission to harm yourself more than the people who've harmed you. And you're thinking, well, no, I didn't molest myself. I didn't steal from myself. I didn't abandon myself. But in actuality, you have done more damage to yourself than they have. They may have done it only a few times, but daily, if you're constantly living in that state, you are injuring yourself. You are causing emotional, physical damage that is more than the actual act of what they did, because you're reliving it. You're pushing play and you're pushing rewind. You're pushing rewind. You're pushing rewind. And I'm not saying it's your fault, and I'm not saying it's our client's fault or our congregation's fault, but they're constantly pushing rewind, rewind, play, rewind, play, rewind, play. So it's a re-injury, re-traumatizing yourself because perhaps you don't know what to do. Or perhaps that's what you saw people do. When people in your family were hurt, they just resorted to rewind, play, rewind, play, rewind, play, rewind, play, injury, play, injury, 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 injury. And that's way more pain than any of us can manage. And we'll have to make a decision. Either we're going to be destroyed by unforgiveness, not the action. The action is not what's destroying you. It's the unforgiveness that does more damage, and that will eventually be your demise. The unforgiveness can be the death of you, and you get to decide, do I want unforgiveness to be the death of me? If you want to move forward, you have to press forward.